If I had a nickel every time I saw someone say League of Legends is dying, I would probably have more money than I've made my entire life on YouTube. It's a very popular thing for people to say nowadays. There's always situations that pop up that go something along the lines of someone gets frustrated with League, they take a break, or they quit the game, and after reaffirming their belief of how bad they think the game is with other people who've gone through a similar experience, they say that means the game is dead. I don't really buy into that. I think League actually has improved a lot in a lot of different ways as time has gone on. It's so much nicer nowadays, for instance, never having to fight for roles in champion select anymore, and it's so nice getting to remake games if you have a DC or AFK at the start. A lot of the new champions being released nowadays seem really creative and fun to play as or against, and just in general, the game is so much more polished nowadays with things like graphical updates that we've seen throughout the years. League still has its problems, don't get me wrong. I mean, just recently there's been this big outcry about issues that pro teams have with stuff that Riot's done, like making huge sweeping patch changes right before playoffs and all this controversy that you guys have been seeing this past week. Patches in general sometimes can just not be fun for even casual players to play. I mean, every time we have a tank meta top lane, I play League more to cure my insomnia than to have any amount of fun, but regardless of how details affect the game from patch to patch, overall the game hasn't shot itself in the foot in any major way over the years to lose players for the most part. League is still really massive right now. MOBAs are in general, and whether you like them or not, I suspect they're going to keep their place in the gaming industry as the dominating genre for quite a while longer. They have elements, whether they're intentional or not, that may make them last longer than any previous king of gaming in the past. We've discussed many times in previous videos how games have a ton of different tools at their disposal, different kinds of fun that they can use to hook players and give them an entertaining evening when someone decides to pick up and play a game. In game design, there's typically been 8 kinds of fun when talked about. One of the reasons that MOBAs have exploded so much in the way that they have is because they managed to harness all 8 kinds of fun in a single video game, while most games focus on just 1 or 2. But when it comes to keeping players, there's really only one thing that matters: player boredom. This is something that's subjective, obviously, depending on who it is that's playing the game. Some people will get bored of an entire game's concept within a month, while others will play it for decades regardless of how stale it may get, but keeping the game fresh for the wider audience is the only thing that really matters when you're talking about a game's longevity. There's a few different ways a developer can do this, keeping their audience's attention. One way is by constantly changing the game with patches, updating old content, and adding some new stuff. Most games like League of Legends do this nowadays, and a ton of people might think that this is the big reason a lot of online games can last for decades, keeping players entertained for so long, but I wouldn't say it's actually the driving force behind their lifespan. A new champion rework every once in a while, plus the usual buffs and nerfs, isn't typically enough to keep a player from leaving if they're bored. The number one thing successful games seem to do that keeps them alive for so long often ends up being creating a new experience every time someone plays a game. Like, think about the 2 genres that were most popular before MOBAs took off: MMOs and real-time strategy games. Quick video game history lesson: the first series of RTS games that's quite often credited with inventing the genre would be the Dune series, Dune 1 and 2, developed by Westwood Studios in the early 90s. Before then, ideas like gathering and managing resources or commanding a large number of forces had already existed, particularly in older board games, but were often slow due to players always being required to take turns. The idea of everything always going on at once in real time was first brought successfully into the world of video games by the Dune series. However, one thing you may notice as you're watching this old gameplay of Dune 2 on screen right now is each side has the same type of units. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if you guys didn't know these games well before watching this video, since although both were successful, they weren't breakout hits or anything. It wouldn't be until Westwood went on to develop Command and Conquer, where you had 2 separate factions, each with different yet balanced units unique to either side, that the RTS genre really started taking off. Now, of course, the most popular and well-known RTS is the StarCraft series, which takes this idea to beautiful levels where you have 3 completely separate and unique races that you can choose to play that in theory are still balanced despite their differences. So how does this fit into what I'm talking about? Well, when you play an RTS like StarCraft, you'll have a different experience every game you play, even if you're going to do something like play the same race every game. There's obviously little nuances in how you play, like let's say I'm a Terran player and I want to bunker rush every single game. But even if I'm doing that, the same strategy every single game on the same map too, let's say, you'll still have to prepare for different experiences depending on the player you're playing against. Playing against another Terran, a Zerg, or Protoss will all make the situation completely different. Some players will react differently, some races will inherently react differently. Even if I'm choosing to play the game the exact same way to a T, ignoring all my options to be more creative, outcomes can still vary wildly depending on other factors, namely my opponent. This provides a fresh experience for people playing the game, since every single game you may come up against something different. You never know what's going to come through that door. This is the same for MMOs, the other genre that was king before MOBAs. In MMOs, whether you're doing PvP or PvE, most games have a dozen different classes and different specializations for each class. So even if you're only playing one character, one class, and spec in PvP every day for hours on end, to be a good player at least, you'll have to be ready to play against all the different kinds of matchups you'll encounter. This is why I think MOBAs are probably going to last much longer than the MMO or RTS ever did. MOBAs like League of Legends take this idea and run with it tenfold. You don't just have 3 separate races or a dozen classes in a MOBA game, you have hundreds. Not only that, but you have 10 players in every game you play, not just you and one opponent. Every match consists of 10 players who will all be playing different champions, where each champion can be built in at least a couple of ways, and where depending on how the game unfolds, you'll have a different strategy for how you want to go about winning, all culminating in a vastly different experience from match to match. A lot of people come up to me and ask how I can play Aurelia so much, how I can stand to play the same champion for thousands of games over the course of years without ever getting bored. Well, this is exactly how. In League of Legends, even if you're doing the exact same thing every single game, playing the same champion with the same runes and the same masteries and the same skill level order and the same build, you have so many variables that will change from one game to the next that no 2 games will ever be the same experience. Even when you do have a matchup that you know, like an Aurelia versus Mundo that I've played hundreds of times or something, maybe one game I'll win the matchup 1 versus 1, maybe one game I'll lose it, maybe one game I'll win from a jungle gank. You'll always have a fresh experience, and that's not even touching on how many options you have if you play more than just one character with the same build over and over. It's actually kind of incredible just how many variables can change from one game of League to another, considering how simple the game is often touted as. When you see a genre or a multiplayer game die out, that typically comes from veteran players getting bored and feeling like every match they play is the same old over and over again. But with the format that MOBAs have created, I don't think that's ever going to happen on a large scale, at least for a very long time to come. There's always a possibility that Riot could do something like go and pull a Jagex, where they make sweeping gameplay changes that push players away from the game out of pure hatred for removing the wilderness or trade limits or something, but unless they do something crazy like that, I don't think League, or any other MOBA for that matter, is going to get stale for most people to a point where it's no longer king of the gaming industry. Maybe some of you who still love League of Legends love hearing that, maybe some of you who quit the game already don't, but I'm not too sure if it's that far off from the truth, although only time will tell. Anyway though, if you're still listening to me ramble on, thank you very much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'll see you all soon, but until next time, thanks for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.